Hello, we are we are live. We are live. This is a really fun group gathered here today on Tree One. I am Uzoma Asagwara. I am here to moderate tonight's conversation with incredible human beings that all have wonderful backgrounds, I have to say. Oh my gosh. I'm loving the lighting. Bro, I'm having a cozy. So I'm just gonna give like a little brief intro, and then I hope we can just jump right into it if folks are okay with that. Yeah, okay. My name is Uzoma Asagwara. I happen to be an MLA representing Union Station constituency in downtown Winnipeg, community organizer, friend to like two people because I have no friends. Just joking, I have some friends. And really excited to be here today, moderate an amazing conversation around, I'm going to read the theme exactly verbatim, peace building and de-escalation as harm reduction. We have got incredible experts in harm reduction, de-escalation, community, relationship building, all of the things. And so we've got Davey, they can give a quick wave.
Hello.
You've got the amazing Dawn. And we've got the wonderful and looking very cozy Ro. And if each person is able, maybe we can start in the order that I introduce folks. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a bit about yourselves, doing an introduction, that'd be fantastic. Davey, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Uzoma. My name is Davey. I go by they, them. I am the Director of Operations at West End 24-Hour Safe Space, which is an overnight safe space for youth in the West End. I also organize with QPOC Winnipeg. I'm just around, out and about in the city, out here doing things. Yeah, I think Dawn, take it away.
Okay. I'm Dawn, and I also do stuff and things.
Amazing.
We're in the same field. It's so exciting. But for the most part, I've been in harm reduction for about 15 years as a peer on the Manitoba Harm Reduction Network, and then as a consultant for the Manitoba Association for Community Health. And I am a person who uses drugs, and so sometimes at least sex, and so it's good to know how to do that safely. Just saying. And I just think that like people who use drugs should be regarded the same as people who don't use drugs, and should be entitled to the same safety, stability, and security as everyone else. Hey, we're people first.
Hi, I'm Ro. I also use they, them pronouns. I also do stuff and things. I work at Sunshine House. I don't even know what to tell you what I do there. It's a weird mix. And I do community organizing as well. I've been involved in Barnun for a long time, which is a local abolitionist group here, prison abolitionist group. So I, think about community safety a lot as a part of that work, just for fun, because I love it. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about myself. I'm also, when we have gatherings, I'm around in the sort of queer scene as a queer and trans person, and just a general autistic weirdo. So yeah. Also, today is International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers, which I think is really important to acknowledge when we're talking about building safe worlds for people. So that's it for me.
You're all amazing. I really appreciate the I do stuff and things aspect of your intros. I think it's very all-encompassing, and so well played on that one. So let's just jump right in. Can we just jump right in? Is that cool with everybody?
Yeah.
This theme is I think, dependent on where anybody is at, could be very specific, could be kind of broad, but I'd really love to hear from everyone what this means to you. Peace building and de-escalation as harm reduction. What automatically kind of jumps to mind, and what do you think and feel in response to that? And so I'm not sure if anybody, I'll just leave it to you folks who would ever like to kick it off. Dawn? All right.
So what comes to mind for me is, I guess that what I'm kind of discovering as I go along doing it is that my end goal is I would like to see a drug user community, and not just drug users in the community or people who use drugs in the community, but like establish a community of people who use drugs. So that like if a bad dose batch came in, then we could put an alert to all people who are using drugs, and then like they can know to check their drugs. And then if there was like someone who had like a drug checking machine that was cruising around, then we would know to utilize that machine, and then therefore reduce the amount of unnecessary overdoses or harms associated with using those drugs.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's actually being done. The last piece that you articulated there, Dawn, people driving around and providing what folks need in order to check their drugs and make sure that they're safe. It's what they want the drugs to be, right? And they know what they're using. That's actually happening in other jurisdictions. Yeah, that's something that it's efforts that folks are making elsewhere. And so there's no reason why, why can't we do that here in Manitoba? Ro, do you have any thoughts on the theme for today?
Yeah, I do. Because I helped facilitate a workshop that has a similar name to this.
Okay.
That workshop has the word peace building in it, and that word comes from a zine written by an Australian group of activists that were doing a lot of like Indigenous grassroots, what they called peacekeeping in the 90s and 2000s, and they wrote it's like not, some of the language is kind of out of date, but it's still really, really valuable. This book about de-escalation and what they call peacekeeping and peacemaking and peace building. And it's like different ways that you're intervening in violence. Peace building specifically is trying to work towards making a more just world for everybody. And the thing that I really like about their work is that they talk about violence not in a way where it shows up between like two individuals or two conflicting groups, but as something structural as well. I think we don't think about violence that way a lot of the time. And so part of peace building is removing institutional barriers, addressing racism, addressing homophobia, just like all of the things that oppress people are also forms of violence, but don't really come into the conversation when we're talking about like nonviolent crisis intervention, etc. And so I think like kind of like building on what Dawn had said, oftentimes when groups, particularly like community organizations, are talking about de-escalation, they're talking about especially people who use drugs or people who are perceived to be using drugs, because that's not always even what's actually happening. There's just a lot of assumptions as like the problem or as somebody that needs de-escalating, rather than taking a look at what power structures exist and how people are coming into a space and trying to work with people to come up with solutions that are just meeting people's needs. And so it's sort of like part of a bigger project of taking apart the structures that oppress us. And yeah, particularly as we're like talking about relying less on policing, there's a lot of calls for more social workers and more healthcare workers, and a lot of these things also exist in those fields. So looking at how these things play out. And
Ro, when you say a lot of these things exist in those fields, what are you referring to when you say a lot of these things? Are you talking about violence in those fields of social work and?
Of course. So I'm just babbling on, but yes, I mean racism. I mean discrimination against people who are using substances. I mean people being punished for being poor. I mean ableism. All of those things that we see as like problems in policing also exist in a lot of other sort of like helping professions and people that we would sort of think to call on when you want to de-escalate a situation. And so trying to think about like other ways that we can address stuff that legitimately comes up or try to prevent crises from happening in the first place, so that we're not just trying to like put out fires, we are trying to shift the power in our wider communities, so that everybody's needs are met. And yeah, I feel like I went a little off there.
No, not at all. And I think you touched on a couple of things that are so important in these conversations. And, you know, I really appreciate that you specifically identified the fact that, you know, the way that people naturally can be inclined to think about violence and who violence happens between, you know, like you captured that really well, and that the focus on structural violence and even people being able to understand what that means is so important. So I really appreciate that you also, you know, talked about a lot of the entities that people are calling on to be the ones to intervene and provide support. You know, if there is a crisis, you're identifying that those systems as well also perpetuate violence in their own ways, and oppression is a really, really important thing. So I don't think you did any of that. I think you were, you know, it was clear. So thank you. And Davey, you are, I know I can see it stewing and brewing, and I'm so curious to know your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I first of all agree wholeheartedly with both Dawn and Rose said. And I think that like part of where my experience with this comes into play is I work with We2For and like addressing crisis in the overnight with folks who do use drugs and who are also facing multiple barriers in a like in a system that is like set up for people to lose in. And so a lot of the things when addressing crisis or addressing like de-escalation, it's not really, and I get this question a lot, where folks are like, well, what do you do in this situation? It's not really about the situation. It's more about addressing people's basic needs and what they need first. So like a lot of it is just like, can I get you some water and some food? And like, you know, can you come inside from the cold? That kind of stuff, where like, you know, seeing yourself as a part of the community as a whole and not just like your own safety is like I said the last time, whereas it's like thinking about redefining what safety is as a community and seeing ourselves outside of our own situations. I have to, when I think of this theme tonight, I thought of something my friend and also my boss and also someone I've learned so much from, Lynn Hausbar, who's the executive director of SNA. And her and I get this question a lot when it comes to We2For, is like, what do you do in crisis situations? Or how do you de-escalate? And we were joking one day and she said something that was like so summed it up perfectly. And she said, de-escalation starts the moment you meet someone. And so it can be about, it's so much more about relationships with the community and like building safety that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. It's really beautiful. And that's something that, you know, I feel like you know, in the groups that we probably navigate and relationships that we have and the work that, you know, we introspectively do and collectively do, the relationship building piece, I think with certain types of experience just happens naturally. You just something that it's something that, and I would like to get your thoughts on this. Is it something that you think can be almost taken for granted? You know, is it something that maybe for some folks, some organizations, whatever it is in the work that you do, is something that, is it something that for you feel comes really naturally at this point? Is it something that you have to continue to be intentional at working at and building and navigating? It's such a key component to what it is we're talking about. So is it something that for you folks feels still very intentional in the way that where you meet people, where they're at, or is it something that feels like very easy and very natural at this point?
I mean, I think like a little bit of both. I think it's kind of a relationship that you have to like nurture. I think of like how like Dawn's like always checking in with her folks all the time. And I think Dawn would be a good person to answer this question.
So, I don't know. For me, I just want to be the change I want to see. So like, I can't expect anyone else to do differently if they don't know differently. And so then like, if the common response is like, money is king, that freaks me out, pardon me, just because, I mean, like that's giving an inanimate object, power to make decisions, without compassion, empathy, or understanding. And I think that those things are really key, elements that should be a part of every relationship. And then like, the more I learn about like my culture and who I am and how I relate to like this land and the environment around me and those people in it, then like, I want to care for myself, but I also want to care for all those things that are around me that, like, and then it means I just, I have a lot of feelings about everything that are very deep all the time, which is drugs, which is why I do drugs. So I don't have to deal with all those feelings all the time. I just be a blubbering ball of feelings all the time, which is great somewhere, but it's not necessarily effective here. One thing I wish though is there's a song by Nate Dogg called Regulators. I wish that was real. I wish that like in situations when like there was a safe consumption site that was operating in a really good way, that we could be like regulators, and then like, just random people from the neighborhood would just turn around and be like, you want to talk about it? And like their whole job would be to like de-escalate the situation and like protect those spots, so that way they weren't like run over by bigger, better dogs, or also run over by, the police, which can sometimes be bigger, better dogs.
That's okay. So, but before I'm going to keep processing. Thank you, Dawn.
Sorry.
Ro, do you have no, don't apologize. Don't apologize. You're fantastic and wonderful. There's a lot, I think there's a lot in this conversation that comes up that's important to think about and be reflective on, which is good. And Ro, I feel like I don't know what you're thinking. I really want to know what you're thinking on this.
I'm just listening to what everyone else is saying. But yeah, like your relationship with people are the thing that they're the entire reason that all of this work is worth doing, or that we have community with other people. And it's like particularly hard right now because we can't see each other in the ways that we're used to. But trying to make do, and I look forward to when we can see each other again. But it's like the backbone of everything, because if you have deep relationships with people, then you're just being able to like treat everyone that you come into contact with humanity and like as an entire human being, and not with fear and as something that you are trying to like manage, or in terms of like the de-escalation part, then like that just derails everything. So
yeah. So what's a good, like, in terms of peace building, what does that, if you're going to think about that intentionally, what are some intentional steps that people can take in order to help facilitate that? Like what can that look like in the communities that we navigate, the organizations that we navigate and try to access, the systems people are trying to navigate and access and provide care within? What is that intentional, like what can intentional peace building work look like?
I guess like acknowledging that just because you're uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean you're being attacked. Like that would probably de-escalate so many situations. As if like just because you know, because I crack jokes and like sometimes I can come off as being sarcastic or like, you know, quick-witted and sometimes in the right time it's great. Sometimes not at the right time it can come off as being like making someone uncomfortable, and like sometimes making someone uncomfortable can change the way that they interact with me, or it can change the way that they're going to deliver services to me. And if I wasn't an empath, I wouldn't notice and I wouldn't care. But like, I do. I do. And so like, and that's me. And I'm like only 1 year old in the hood. So I'm a hood baby. And like, never mind people who lived out here their whole lives. And like, so reading people is a skill that they've acquired. And they know when people are being honest and frank with them. And that's actually kind of like suspicious, like what the heck. And they also know when people are withholding information from them. And they also know when someone is being genuine and authentic, and when they are, I don't know, just like at face value, like what you see is what you get. And like, that's like appreciated, you know? And so it's like, it's a fine line to walk because you don't necessarily know where you're walking. But like the way I see it is like my spirit is bigger than me, it's smarter than me, it's braver than me, and it's not going to take me to places that I don't want to go or don't want to be. And like I give thanks to my spirit all the time because like my spirit loves me enough that it wants me to love myself, right? And so like I want to share that with folks that I know and care about. And like I believe that everyone is a good person fundamentally. And then I also think that like, you know, they deserve good things. And that if people treat them good, then they'll believe they deserve those good things too. And then maybe they'll work towards those things, you know? And so like that's what intentionally it would look like for me.
That was really powerful. That last statement you just made was so beautiful, Dawn. I have to say, like it's that affirmation that we don't even realize you can be delivering to a person in that way, and that's a really, really powerful statement. Thank you for being so wise.
I super agree like with what you're saying, Dawn, especially about how like people know like what you're about. Like I mean, like I work with teenagers, like you can't get anything past those kids, like nothing. And so like when you are so sincere or when you're like insincere, like that's totally something that's readable. And like I like what Rose said earlier as in terms of you know, a person going through something or a crisis happening, how you know, it's not something to manage, you know, like when you like start to think about like controlling a situation or like controlling a person's behavior or something like that, it puts you it puts a barrier, a line in between you and what's going on. And I think that's where like peace building is gone then, right? You know, like where we want to be on the same level with people, and we want to, when we're helping people, not think that we're better than them, you know?
That's a really, I think you just finishing on these really powerful, hard-hitting points. That last piece is so important, and it's so often, I think about the systems that, you know, we navigate and we work within. And if you're in a position of authority, position of power, whatever that means, right? But if I think people find themselves in situations where at some point, you know, the person in the position of authority or power will flex that. They'll make it known that there's a potential or existing imbalance versus being on that equal level, safe space together. And it's interesting that you really just, I think, captured that really, really well and importantly, Davey. So thank you for that. I hope that landed for me. I would imagine that'll really land for folks. And Ro, no pressure, but you know.
I think I fully agree with what both Dawn and Davey have said, and that I think Davey was talking about this too, like where you're building collaborative solutions with people and working with people, and when you have power, trying to figure out how to shift that or even when it's like institutionalized, where you take direction from the person that has less power, because people know what they need. Also, like, we're not here to fix other people, so it's not helpful. But I think that, like, even just in our own relationships, like our personal relationships with each other, being willing to make mistakes, being willing to like have really hard conversations with people that you care about, and not shy away from that. And like, I think that it's so loving, actually, to work through hard stuff with people who are in your lives. And that to me is also peace building. Like, it's not always fun or pretty necessarily, but it's really, really important. So
You got one in there too. It's loving. That's just so powerful. It's just so powerful. And it's true. It's true. And I wonder if that's something that I've heard a lot more in the last few months, people talking about doing that work and building relationships from a loving place, like as acts of love. And do you folks, is that something that you've heard for a long time, or are you hearing more recently? And is that something that you think should be a focus, like that narrative and talking about doing this work from a loving place? Is that something that you think should be more foundational in the way that this work is talked about?
I think it's one of those things where it couldn't be something that was like mandated. Like, it couldn't be like, in order to do this work, you need to be loving or come from loving.
Yeah.
Because then it easily gets super skewed to like what people perceive as love or loving, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just it couldn't be mandated. Like either I don't know how to say it. Like, it's just like I have that in me, and I mean I suck at being mean. Like, I remember saying, like, I wish I could be like the people that, you know, are so quick to dispose of me, and I felt convicted right as soon as I said it. And it's just like, even just like speaking that out into existence for me was like enough, and I was like, take that back. Yeah. And it's just like, but like, that's me, right? And it's just like, yeah. I mean, like, would I really want the entire room to be just like me? No, we'd all be crying together and like big sobbing, massive feelings. And so, room, no. But it's not something that can be mandated. And I just think that, like, as long as we're open to the opportunity of personal growth, and like, then there's room in there for people to discover for themselves what that means. And you know, yeah. But if we never provide the opportunity for people to discover for themselves what that means, then yeah, we have done a disservice and we have caused harm, you know?
That was definitely, like, I think about nursing. You know, I was a nurse for a number of years, and just how that's just not a conversation in clinical settings. And, you know, some people use language of institutional settings or whatever it is. Like, people don't really talk about heart work or leading with love or anything like that. That's definitely something that's, you know, more grassroots in community. But it's powerful. And thank you for what you said there, Dawn. I do think a room full of Dawns would be so fun. And
I would cry with a room full of Dawns too.
There you go.
Yeah, you can invite me to that. I would.
So what are your thoughts? Like, if we were to dive specifically now into de-escalation as harm reduction, I mean, there are lots of thoughts that come to mind for me, to be honest, about that. Like, depending on any given day, I feel like my perspective on that and what that means could be a little bit different. But again, like, intentionally, if we're talking about de-escalation as harm reduction and being intentional about what that looks like, are there steps, are there pieces that come to mind as like intentional ways of facilitating that, of actually actioning that?
Well, I always think about peace. So before, I used to pray for strength and I pray for peace now, because that way, you know, more opportunities for that to come around instead of, you know, challenges that demand my strength. Oh God. So I pray for peace.
That was a great whole sentence there. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely pray for peace. And for me, that's kind of the end goal. I mean, like, because like life is a great mystery, right? So you never really know. What is it? There's a song. I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. It's like you can plan a pretty picnic, but you can't predict the weather, right? And so like we could have good intentions. We could want good things for one another, but we can't predict the weather of that person where they're coming from, or the weather in general, or like what's going to happen when both of our weathers collide. And so, I mean, like, that's where I'm coming from with that.
And Davey, can I, like, in terms of if thinking about the work that you do at We24, you know, as an example. So, you know, what for you in terms of doing that kind of work, right, under the umbrella of what you provide as a service provider, as a community, you know, organizer, community builder, all of that. Are there intentional practices or things that you think you folks do that hopefully help facilitate de-escalation as harm reduction, or you know, what kind of comes to mind for you in your role?
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a few parts to this answer, but like personally, it's been a journey, I think, in terms of like decolonizing like the way that I was raised and think, and like in terms of, you know, like thinking from an anti-racist way, and like, you know, like really like doing the like self-work in that. So I think that's like kind of step one. And then in terms of like professionally, like with We24, you know, there are certain things that are done, and like things that, you know, I'll train staff with, but like a lot of it is like really like planting foundation blocks. Like it's not really specific. So I would say like intentional things would be like, you know, come from that decolonizing perspective, like be open to growth, like Dawn said, and, you know, like understand like the systems in place that are causing these barriers to folks, understand that folks, you know, are hungry, tired, and cold, you know, and like come from a really reducing harm perspective. So like, you know, if a community member is, you know, acting a little strange or whatnot, you know, and like, you know, a person calls the cops or whatnot, that's really bringing more harm than anything. And, you know, when you start to think in that way, like, you know, what actually will the cops do in this situation? Like really pulling apart that way, and like changing how you think of like, you know, safety, and changing how you think of like what you want to happen in that situation. And so it's a lot of education. It's a lot of like on like in terms of training staff, it's a lot of like, you know, teaching what we believe in as a crew at We24. But yeah, it's just kind of coming from like different lenses of belief, like, you know, anti-racism, anti-poverty, you know, decolonizing, just, you know, those things. And like not, and like believing in them, not just being in the words, you know, like I feel like the word, the phrase harm reduction can be like kind of like trendy or whatever, but like really taking apart like what reducing harm means, and to all specific populations, right?
All of that sounds actually super intentional, like being intentionally, actively anti-racist, you know, decolonizing, yeah, all of that, your values, building a culture within your organization, educating folks, like all of those things, meeting basic needs, like those are all intentional actions that contribute to that. And that's interesting. It's probably something that for a lot of folks comes so naturally. It's something that's just part of your day-to-day, not just when you show up at your workplace, but I would imagine for, you know, for you folks and others, that it's probably something that's built into like just, it's just how you live your life. And so that I'm curious to know if, you know, Rowan, your role at Sunshine House, specifically, if there are things that kind of resonate in what, you know, Dawn and Davey have said for you, or are there other things that come to mind in terms of intentional, you know, practices and things like that that you undertake in your role there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the way I answer this question differs a lot based on what the context is, but in the context of like Sunshine House and like community spaces like that generally, I think building off of on a lot of what Davey was saying. Like social services have a deep colonial history that is ongoing, frankly. Like that genocide has not ended. And so you have to be really careful when you're working in nonprofits, I think, and be really, really intentional about your relationships with people, and knowing that for some people, this is like a matter of life and death, whether you can come in and be warm and be fed and use a bathroom without harassment, or have access to things you need, or use the phone, or just talk to another human for a while that's not gonna like treat you like you're on another planet. Those are all really, really basic things that happen like every day. But also I think that like being willing to see people and really just engage in whatever way feels good for whoever walks in your door is harm reduction. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you have like no boundaries and people can just do whatever you want, but to constantly be coming up with creative ways to make the space feel good for everyone, and that the people who are coming through your doors are the people that are defining that and have control over what that looks like and what that means and what's happening there and who's staffed and who's like what's happening should be dictated by the people that are showing up and asking for it, basically. And so that all is, I think, like inherently de-escalating, because if you're in a place where you feel comfortable and seen, then you're not walking in that door like expecting to get kicked out or wondering like what the thing is you're going to say or do that will piss off somebody and start a fight, or it goes back to like having relationships with people. But it really, I feel like there's not there are lots of spaces that don't do a lot of really rigorous self-reflection, and all of us always have to keep like working at it and doing better. Like it's very active and constant, but it's so necessary, because it's like sorry, I am losing my train of thought, but I'm just like, you have to keep listening, otherwise your work is pointless and you're not there to like solve other people's problems for them. You are there to give them tools and take direction, and work on something together. So
I dig it.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Although it's like when I think about systems, I'm like, that's so not what so many. It's just not what often you're
The language
taught.
of your systems, it's like the language of your systems, are like the foundation of on which they're built upon. Like there's not a lot of understanding, compassion, or empathy in it. Like and the way it's written, it's almost like it's been written in stone, even though it's on paper or parchment or whatever they use at that time. But like even the justice system, the way it says that it's founded under the supremacy of God, like that's kind of a forever thing. And like we even say that like that there's the way that some of the laws, some of the foundational laws are built, that the foundation of them can never be changed. And so like if the foundation of the law is murder, right? Like you can have first and second and third degree murder, but you can't change murder from being murder, right? So like there's things that like the language of the systems do not have room in them for empathy, understanding, and compassion. And so it makes sense that the people working in them wouldn't value those as being necessary in order to do the work that they're doing. It's crazy that we have a healthcare system that we have to like have workshops to remind people to treat other people like people. You would think people working in healthcare would be like the epitome of like healthy relationships. right? Like, look at the healthcare system. Wow, they love each other. I wish I want to take better care of myself so I had the exact same thing, or something like that. Instead of hearing horrible tales of like people I love and care about going to dreading going to emergency, and then when they get there, being like, that's why I dreaded going there, because I knew that once they found out I was a person who used drugs, I wouldn't be allowed to have any access to painkillers, even though I'm in tons of pain. And then my every single symptom that I just told them would be minimized. And then I would be invalidated by the end and pretty much told that if I just quit drugs, then I wouldn't be in the situation I'm in. And it's just like, ha, 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 ha. And it's also another thing too, where I wish that sometimes, like when it comes to police, they make me nervous for a whole bunch of reasons. But I guess the bottom line for me is that like their authority as police officers trumps my authority as a human being. And so as a human being, I can never call in a police officer and be like, listen, man, like you're being really inhuman right now. What you're doing is indecent and rude and crude and crass. You shouldn't be allowed to behave like that. The police officer with more authority than me is allowed to then discern on his whim, or their whim, pardon me, about how they're going to handle me. Are they going to catch and release, lucky me? Or is it like Starlight Tour for me, trauma llama ding dong? So it's just like, that is very unnerving and very unsettling. And that in my world, of people who use drugs and people who are frontline service workers in that area, police officers are not help. They do not protect and serve my community at all. And so when the go-to is to call the police because somebody made them feel uncomfortable, that's a threat. It's a threat to me. And so then when if front desk people, that's what they're resorting to, that's probably a place I wouldn't want to go back to for help again. And if police were trained and were like the epitome of like what justice could look like if it wasn't so blind, then maybe I'd have more faith in them. But because it's all like their authority is discerned on their whim, so like they don't have to have empathy, compassion, or understanding in order to do the job better. You would think that would be a part of. How do you mandate that? How do you be like, you need to have compassion, empathy, and understanding? And here we have a sliding scale of empathy, and if you're at a 0, well, you can take these 4 workshops and you can be at a 7. Let's keep it sacred. Okay.
Well, I mean, you said so many things, Don, that really make a whole lot of sense. I'm sure like so many people are like, yep. But there's something that you touched on that I think is really interesting, and it's that it's what people are actually formally being taught, right? Like, what is it that where is the emphasis being placed on in terms of what people are being taught in terms of how they provide care? And I guess my question would be, in terms of what people are being formally taught, like if those healthcare providers, for example, let's just use healthcare, right? Do you think that more emphasis, and what would that look like if there was an emphasis on intentionally teaching the importance of, because I mean, I remember back to nursing and there is like a section on empathy and compassion and all of that, but it's not necessarily something that is as involved when you bind that with and you intertwine that with anti-racism and decolonizing and all of these other things, right? It's just empathy, compassion, all of that. So, do you think that that's something that needs to be embedded, in the formal education that people are getting? What could that look like? Because you've all touched on it, but it's not necessarily something that formally people are learning, right?
How many of you love theater?
Pardon me?
How many of you love to do theater? They're like, yippee, sign me up. I want to do theater. No, that's right. That's right. So here's the thing: is for me, I do improv theater, not like the kind you usually see of tell me a person, place, a thing, or whatever. The improv theater I do is called playback theater, and it's a form of improv, and what it is that there's a conductor that navigates between the audience and the performers, and then the conductor draws a story from the audience, a moment, and then the actors reenact that moment, the teller's emotions on spot. So like they wake up in the morning, they burnt their toes, it ruined their day, and then the actors would reenact that moment of like their day being ruined, of like, oh, right? Through sound and gesture. And what happens is it takes that person's individual, isolated, segregated experience, and it becomes a shared memory afterwards. And it becomes, it builds compassion and empathy and understanding, because complete strangers that you don't know are able to demonstrate that they've heard you, they've validated your experience, and we're also able to demonstrate it through body, sound, and language. And then that's how, like, if all we are is story from beginning to end, and that's the legacy we leave behind, then we've become shared story in that moment. Mm. And so then even the next time they burn their toast and it ruins the day, they'll remember that time that 3 actors got up and performed that for them. And then it won't feel like such an insignificant moment as much as it is a moment that was shared, right?
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to, I mean, it's one of those things where like empathy, compassion, and understanding can't be taught in a classroom in that kind of setting. And like, even when you're talking about healthcare, like they have some of them have practicums, but then how do you prevent those practicums from becoming poverty tourism? Right? Because I mean, like, what you don't ever have to live the experience. You always get to be an outsider looking in, like kind of weird God kind of complex going on. And like, unless you live the experience, then you won't ever have like a deep understanding of what that experience is like for people in it. And so, I mean, like healthcare workers, I mean, nothing like a little bit of homelessness to become one with the universe, right?
Bro, I saw you nodding a few times there. What's coming to mind for you?
I mean, I just love what Don is saying, and I think actually at the very beginning when you introduced us all as experts, I was like, oh, I'm not an expert. And I say that a lot when I talk about these things too, because I'm not an expert, and I feel like when it comes to, sorry, my dog is just, yeah.
Oh wait, that's not helping.
Fine. Just like the idea that people they know what's going on in their own lives, and because you have a degree in nursing, or you're a doctor, or you're like registered social worker or anything, does not make you an expert. I agree that it's really hard to teach somebody empathy. Like we probably do need to do more of that kind of stuff throughout the education system. But I think that if you are like, it shouldn't be starting at college and university. But maybe there could be more of a like focus on people not kind of walking into these rooms and being like, I know better than you because I'm a professional. And like, we always know what's going, or a lot of us know what's going on in our bodies, and know like we are our own experts. So it's really disempowering when we're having that like taken away from us, and our knowledge is not being respected about our own selves, but it's also common. So. Yeah.
I think that yes, all of those things. And then also too, another part of it is folks who are in the like upper management and who are hiring to like not only like prioritize people like with lived experience, but also to be radical in the way that you are an employer and like support the people that you are asking to do work for you. Okay. Like make those radical decisions, like help them with housing, go out of your way to like be a support to them, people not just on the front lines have to be making these choices as well. The folks who are supporting the folks on the front lines. So for me, like as someone who hires people, I will always take folks with experience over someone who has like a degree and like that's it.
Okay.
Just straight up. And I think that that's like a thing, like not the whole solution, obviously, or whatever, but I think part of it. And I think that like, people have to, think about things differently and support folks in a different kind of radical way.
Yeah.
Again.
So for myself, when you talk about intentional, like because of that, because of those years of experience in playback theater and like listening to other people share their stories, and like not just listening for the sake of needing to speak my turn, but like listening because I want to hear, and I want to be able to as accurately as I possibly can reenact that teller's emotion about what they shared. So like that means I'm in touch with my emotions. So like all those big feelings that I feel very deeply all the time, I'm aware of them, and I know what I'm feeling. So and I also know what I'm thinking, and I also know like how all those kind of connect and how they can become expressed. And I'm very self-aware, which is exhausting. But what it means though is that in the field of life, right? Good luck to anyone try to manipulate me into thinking that I don't know what I'm thinking, or that I don't know what I'm feeling, or that what is it called? Gaslight me. If someone tries to gaslight me, it's just kind of like, you know what? This smells fine. Kind of familiar with that. And then, being able to know how to counter, I guess, crazy makers, or the ones that aren't necessarily there for peace building or for de-escalating. But, because sometimes we do run into those people that just want to watch the world burn, right? And being able to discern which ones are actually active participants in creation, right? And those who are just there to light a match.
That was a mic drop. That was good. I got a visual. That was a whole mic drop, Don.
Just like the fake theater for that.
Yeah. So this is now like a totally random. We've got just about 8 minutes left. And so I'm looking for like a quick, oh yes, Davey.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. Dawn, are you a Scorpio moon? Because that's the thing I need to know.
Well, I'm a Leo.
I know, but like, is your moon sign Scorpio? Because like, all in those feelings and self-aware, I'm a Scorpio moon, and I just feel like I'm here with you on that. I'm also a Leo sun. Anyways, sorry.
Cool. Well, I have a friend of mine who's like into astrology and stuff like that, and she like wants me to do like my chart and stuff, and I'm kind of like, well, I'll get there. So like, I'm glad to have some questions. Be like, so what kind of moon do I have?
And let the people know. I'm curious.
So good. I don't know what any of that means, but that's not a hot clue. Okay, so looking for immediate thoughts, rapid response. There's an announcement this week, press release from the government, that they are descheduling naloxone.
Fucking A.
That came out a few days ago. And so I'd love to know everyone's like immediate, what is your response? If you didn't know and you're hearing it now for the first time, breaking news. Okay, if you knew about it, what was your immediate response thought at the time? And we're going to go to Davey first.
Amazing. Yay. How can I sign me up to buy a bunch? How can I get them? Where can I get them? Naloxone girl.
Valid questions, yes. None of those answers were in the press release, but
yeah,
not exactly. Okay, and next is Dawn.
I think it's wonderful. I mean, like, it turns out, adults can be adults without needing adults or adults to adult for them. It's really bizarre.
Okay. Tongue twister response. I like that. Ro.
It's about time. That was my initial response. Yeah, we should have access to life-saving medication. Like, that's a no-brainer. And it should have been a long time ago. And I'm really, really grateful for everyone who worked really hard to make that happen, because I know that it was a fight. So, thanks.
And is that something, did you hear about that? Did anybody hear about that earlier this week? Or you're hearing it today for the first time? You heard about it earlier, Ro?
I did, yeah.
I caught a glimpse of it probably on like an MHRN post or something through Facebook that like,
okay,
that was something they were working towards, and I was like, yes.
Okay. And so that's what's happening. It was announced. quickly, we've got, it looks like 5 minutes left. Thoughts on what next steps need to be? What are the next steps need to be to make sure that this is something that rolls out in a way that, you know, helps people in community that makes sense? Dawn?
Continue to have conversations that normalize drug use so that people feel safe and being open and honest and frank about what it is they're using, how much they're using, and what they want their use to look like. I mean, talk about it.
Okay. Bro.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Let people know where they can get naloxone. Also, keep removing all the barriers for all kinds of, like, we are in an overdose crisis for sure, and also there's like a lot of other things. We need a safe supply, like, across the board, not just being able to respond to somebody who's had an opiate overdose. So yeah, like, frank conversations, destigmatizing drug use, and just treating people who use drugs like you would treat everyone, with assuming you treat everyone with respect.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, I think safe supply right now, please, everywhere. Yeah, safe supply, safer injection sites, and also, like, make the naloxone accessible everywhere. Like, I don't want to see it just, you know, at, like, the North End and Central, you know, like, I want, like, use drugs everywhere, you know, and, like, making that accessible everywhere, all over the city, not only is for everyone who needs it, but also it opens those conversations for people, and it starts normalizing it. So, yeah.
Awesome points. That last point, I think, Davey, is so important. And I like that you just said that, make it accessible for everyone. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be something that people anywhere can access, and there's no stigma around. And so we've got 3 minutes left. There's a few comments in here. Can you all see the comment section?
Yeah, it threw me real off. I was like, oh God, there's people watching. Oh God.
People really watching. Yeah, and people are very happy. The comments are just lovely. Rose, major poster is great. You are all amazing. Lots of rainbows and hearts. Comment from Karen in regards to it. I saw that comment actually come up across the screen. Dawn, your earlier comment's going to stay with Karen forever. People are crying with joy. Love the hip hop references. Ro, I feel that, Ro. So something you said, Ro, really landed with in the comments here. And the full comment is, everyone's perspective is so insightful about the meaning of harm reduction. And as a full-time university student, I feel like the way the education system has positioned themselves is falling on deaf ears. And it's like, as a student, we're felt to be like robots and not like human beings a lot of the time. That's real. That's real. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dana.
Oh, is that Dan? Sorry. I think I know that person. Hey.
Wonderful comments here. Lots of love to Alexander. Lots of hearts and care to you, Alexander. Yeah, lots of positive comments. So, I don't know why I'm like, what's going on here with too much screen time today? But we've got a minute and a half left. Would anybody like to share anything really quickly as we wrap up? And
I can sing.
You can sing? Wonderful. Okay, so Dawn's gonna sing to close this out. Special thanks before we totally wrap up to Manitoba Harm Reduction Network for just being all around amazing, incredible, outstanding human beings and a great organization, and for helping make this platform happen. Sunshine House, just incredible, amazing, all the things and all the stuff, all the good things and all the good stuff. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight and holding space and sharing space collectively. Our panelists, you folks are just brilliant, outstanding, beautiful, beautiful people. And we're so fortunate to have you in our community. So thank you so much. And Dawn,
Thanks. So the song that comes to mind is the Deer song, and it tells us that the teaching is to remind us to be kind and gentle to ourselves as we're going through trials, challenges, and hardships, and to remember that we're doing the best we can with what we have. Yeah, it's only sung 3 times, which is probably the first time I've seen a teaching be put into practice right away, because most of our songs are sung in 4 rounds. So gentle. And I don't have a drum, so I'm going to sing it a cappella because I do that. Ooh, Weide, Wanishido, Ahadeyo, no Ida. Ooh, Weide, Wanishido, Ahadeyo, no Ida. And Ruska Shadeya, when Yahado, Yedo, when Yahado, Yedo, Shogenia, and Ruska. Shogenia meus and Ruska we high hey do we hey day Wanishido Ahadeyo no we da. Ooh, Weide, Wanishido, Ahadeyo, no we da. And Ruska Jadeya, when Yahado, Yedo, when Yahado, Yedo, Shogahenia, and Ruska, Shogahenia, Meus, and Ruska, we high hey do. Ooh, oh, Weide, Wanishido, Ahadeyo, no Ida. Ooh, oh, Weide, Wanishido, Ahadeyo, no Ida. And Ruska Shadeya, when Yahado, Yedo, when Yahado, Yedo, Shogahenia, and Ruska, Shogahenia meus, and Ruska, we high hey do. Love. And all that jazz.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dawn. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to wrap things up. So everyone, thanks again for the folks who joined this evening. What a pleasure to share space with everyone in this way. Panelists, thank you. Everyone, stay safe, stay well, stay connected, And as we head into, I guess we're in the holidays season, whatever that means to you in your own ways, hope you navigate it with care. So good night.
Choose love.
Thank you.